you're in the right place. This is the Eatfluencer Podcast, and I'm your host, Dr. Maggie Landis. Together, we are going to unpack everything about eating and discover the what, when, and how that will let you lead your best life. This is not your doctor's conversation about nutrition. Today is when you can start to love eating again. Let food be food and you be you. Get ready to get eatfluenced. Welcome back, friends. It has been a minute. If you are new here, I've taken a little break over the last about 2 months to do some other projects, refresh and recharge, but we are back. You are listening to episode 62 of the Eatfluencer Podcast, and we're talking about perfectionism today, which I think is really apropos when I tell you sort of how I got to this place making season 2 of the podcast. If you're new here and you are not familiar with me, my name is Maggie Landis, and I am a physician and public health nutritionist, now turned anti-diet, non-diet expert, speaker, cultural change maker, educator, content creator, what you name it. I want this message of weight neutrality, of weight inclusiveness, to get to all levels of people in our world, particularly women, particularly healthcare professionals. I really want to disrupt this diet culture that we continue to participate in. And a lot of people I meet are participating in it because they don't even know that it's optional. And that's what I'm here to change. And those are the issues we talk about on this podcast. So a little anecdote about my break that I just took. If you have been following this, the last episode before this one was 61, which came out, I believe, the first week in December, and it's now February. When I set this podcast up, I started in October of 2020, and I didn't really plan about having seasons. I know people do that with podcasts, but I just sort of, assumed I was going to make a new episode every week from now until Kingdom Come. I don't know, but I decided that the beauty of producing your own podcast is you get to control when it comes out and how often you produce a new episode. But I had this perfectionistic story in my head. This is what we're talking about today, that, I couldn't stop and call what I had already done season 1 because it's 61 episodes. That sounds like crazy for a first season, because I certainly don't want season 2 to be 61 episodes. What do I call it if I don't call it a season? Listen, I finally came to realize all that nonsense talk is just made up beliefs in my head that are born out of this perfectionistic streak that I have, that you probably have, that we all to a degree have. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Not about producing podcasts, but about perfectionism and diet culture. They are two peas in a pod, and they go hand in hand big time. So, okay, back to this whole story, and I'm going to tell you how I unraveled this for myself, because this will help you, I think. I decided, okay, I'm taking 1 month off. Whatever I call season 2 is season 2, but I'm going to take a month off. The month of December seemed like a good month. I had some other, personal plans going on, and nobody listens in December because they're too busy doing other stuff. So season 2, January, right? I'm going to start. That's when we do everything new, January. January's the new year. It's a new you. All that nonsense. But January came, and I was not motivated. I didn't want to. I wasn't ready. Didn't kind of have a content plan. I was just still sort of, how you slug through the last couple of weeks of the year, and then you need to break from your break. So I waited, and I struggled with this because in my head, I had planned to take a month off and come back. Now, granted, I had not told anybody how long the break was. So why I feel like I am obligated to this fictional other person or other audience But it sounds ridiculous now that I'm saying it out loud. But this is this perfectionistic thinking. It's a mental struggle. And it's underpinning a lot of our problems with nutrition and eating and health and exercise and all the stuff we talk about here, because perfectionism is a competition that we are taking on in our own heads against ourselves, against this, benchmark we cannot reach because we're humans. And so it is always a losing proposition. The good news is nobody else knows the playbook in our heads. So our perfectionism doesn't affect them. You didn't really care whether I took a break or how long my break was, or whether I called it season 1 or season 1A and 1B or season 2, or who the heck cares? Like, that was all stories in my own head. And, we do this. Like, have you ever had a friend get married? All right, you go to the wedding, after the wedding, not like the day of the wedding, but, like the next week when she comes back to work and you see her and you say, oh, were you happy with how everything went? And they're like, yeah, it was great, but, the napkin rings were supposed to be silver and they brought bronze napkin rings. And I really wanted the caterer to put the sauce for the chicken on the side and not on the top. And all those little things are a disappointment only to her, like only to the bride, because she's the only one who knew the playbook ahead of time. If you don't know the plan, you can't be critical or disappointed in the plan because you didn't know the plan. And I say all this because this is how our perfectionistic behavior in diet culture is. In regards to eating and exercising, we are in competition with this idyllic, perfect, fantastical version of ourselves that we have seen in our mind that we will never be, and you're going to always be disappointed. I think we know this, right? We know this, but we let that drive dictate our behavior in so many ways, and it makes us crazy and takes up our time and our energy and our emotional bandwidth and our brain space. And it's really a slippery slope between, having good intentions or doing something deliberately with intentionality to being kind of rigidly compliant, to being perfectionistic, to completely disordered and chaotic behavior. And the diet culture mindset that we are conditioned to have is literally the oil that greases that track. I mean, it is a slippery slope from well-meaning choices to disordered behavior, and in terms of food, even having an eating disorder. So we're going to talk about a couple of specific diet culture behaviors that I feel can be problematic for leading us down this path. But I'm going to offer some alternate ways to handle them without having to totally reject something that you would like to employ. All right. And some of you are doing these things. That's okay. I just want to talk about keeping an open mind on the way that you're doing these things and whether these behaviors are benefiting you or setting you back. And I can't tell you that. You have to know that. You have to judge that for yourself. And like I say over and over on here, it's the why behind every choice that gives it meaning. When you're deciding if something is helpful or harmful, really the intention behind it is what gives it meaning. I mean, we say this all the time, like you can use a knife to cut an apple in half. You can use a knife to stab in somebody's carotid artery and kill them. So the knife is not helpful or harmful. The intention of how you're going to use it is helpful or harmful, right? So, but this is my podcast, so I can talk about whatever I want to talk about. So let's see, we have three things here I want to bring up. These are maybe like tools that you might be using now for your health and nutrition and wellness endeavors. And I just want you to think about how you're utilizing them. And is it in a perfectionistic way that's going to lead you to disordered behavior and keep you, held back? Or is it in a, way that can be neutral, that can just be to, monitor and, help you make deliberate choices, okay? So, the first thing we're going to talk about is fitness trackers. All right. And I have to, I guess, give the disclaimer here that this podcast is not, sponsored by Apple or anything, but I do wear an Apple Watch. And I'll be honest with you, I love it. Mine is old. I have the version 4. They're like up to version 6 or 7 now, I think. I really want a new one. This one is, I dropped it. The glass face is cracked, so it's not really waterproof. And, it doesn't have all the features of the new ones and stuff. I would love a new one. But so I don't want you to think, before we start talking about these activity trackers, I don't want you to think I'm totally against it, because I'm not. I wear one on my wrist. But I have a very specific and deliberate mindset about how to use this as a tool. And I'm telling you, if I would have worn one of these in 1995, if they were around back then, I would have abused this tool, and it would have been like fuel for the fire in terms of disordered behavior. But I like wearing my Apple Watch. It is convenient to see text notifications. It's convenient to check the weather. You're driving somewhere new and it's like tapping your wrist when to turn. I think that's all pretty nifty and cool. But the activity and movement part is where it gets kind of hairy. If you wear an activity tracker like an Apple Watch or a Fitbit or Garmin or whatever, there's always this risk of letting this little piece of technology take over our thoughts. So here's some ways that you could use this helpfully. The information on these activity movement trackers in a helpful way. And this is what I do, okay? When I go outside walking or jogging, I really loosely say jog. It's basically walking fast and lifting my feet off the ground. I do like to wear it because I can see my heart rate. Now, I am not obsessing over it, making sure that my heart rate is in the zone or at whatever percent of my max heart rate and keeping it there for X amount of minutes or whatever. I just take a peek at it so I know, generally speaking, over the course of that walk, where my heart rate was, right? Because heart rate is actually a pretty, good measure of cardiovascular fitness. It's a reasonable proxy. Your resting heart rate, your heart rate during exercise, and then how quickly your heart rate from exercise returns to rest. Those are like reasonable things to know if you want to have a poor man's way to measure your cardiovascular fitness. All right. But not to use it to have some sort of benchmark and beat yourself up and ignore your body's need to rest or recover or push through something that's comfortable because you need to keep your heart rate in some range or whatever. That would be like unhealthy, right? Because you would just be not listening to your body, forcing physical activity kind of against your desire or your ability to do so, just so you can comply with some sort of heart rate chart or some little pinging or check mark or red or green or whatever it is. That is disordered. And, the same thing with like the distance. I do look at the distance and, knowing that I usually go for a walk for 30 minutes and, this day it took me 30 minutes to walk a mile and a half, and a different day I walked 2 full miles in 30 minutes. So that's a like reasonable proxy that I've improved my cardiovascular fitness a little bit. And it's just like a piece of information. I'm in a place in my headspace where I can just wear this device and it feeds me a few pieces of information. And then there's a lot of information on here I just don't care about. I don't care about the calories because that's all bogus anyway. I don't care about getting 10,000 steps. I don't care about closing my rings or keeping a streak going or getting the, challenge of the month badge or whatever. All that stuff is feeding this internal perfectionism monster that does not need any encouragement. We've got enough things in our world feeding the monster that we don't need to put that on ourselves. And I know I have been there. I have been around these, competitions where who has the longest closing all your Apple ring streak, or you get a calendar for your workouts and you want to make sure you have a green check mark every single little box that you did 30 minutes a day or whatever your plan, was. But see, that's all just you competing with yourself. This is back to like the bride and the wedding. Nobody else knows about the napkin rings and nobody else cares. We need to be a little more flexible and gentle with ourselves in terms of exercise, I think. And the side effect of that is not being lazy. The side effect of that is actually desiring to do more exercise, because if it's not punishing and punitive, it's a little more appealing to participate, right? Can we all agree with that? So I'm going to move on to the second thing here. Besides the activity trackers, the fitness trackers, what about having a workout plan? People ask me this, and I'm not a fitness professional. I have lots of non-diet fitness professionals that I learned from. But is it okay if I have like a plan or a schedule or like a really sort of set routine of what I'm going to do when I go to the gym or work out at home or whatever it is? Well, yes, that's okay. This is the kind of thing that can be helpful or harmful. It's how you're executing it and what's the motivation behind your choices that's going to really differentiate whether this is setting you back or, moving you forward. I think one of the key pieces here, and we're talking about exercise, but you can also, apply this to eating, is differentiating a routine from a ritual. And I talk about this in my coaching program. We need to be honest about, are we treating our nutrition and fitness and health, sort of routines more like rituals? Because that's where I think it crosses the line. So having a routine that you go to the gym these days, or this is the amount of weight that you use, or this is the day you do the upper body or the lower body, or this is the day that you go inside or outside to run, or whatever it is. If you're considering your needs, and when I say that, I don't mean just your physical needs, your mental and emotional needs, and you're allowing some space for flexibility and rest, I think that's okay. I think it's okay to have a plan and not just randomly show up at the gym and randomly choose what to do. Now, that's also okay if that's how you like to do it. But if it feels comfortable to have a routine, I think it's okay if it's a routine. The problem is when it becomes a ritual. And here's what, in my mind, defines a ritual. There's two parts that turn a routine into a ritual. Number one is complete and total inflexibility. There's one way, no variation, no deviation. There is an exact, perfect template for doing this, and you have to adhere to it. And secondly, there's moral value attached to your compliance with that template. All right. And think about rituals. Like when you hear the word ritual, I think a lot of people think of religious practices or, you know, kind of like almost ritualistic like behavior around the holidays or something like that. It's um, pretty structured and pretty inflexible, like taking communion at church is like done a certain way every single time. And there is a correct way, at least in their belief system, and there's no variations, and you have to do it that way. And should you choose to deviate from that, yes, there is a moral judgment attached to that choice. So, it's the same thing with this workout plan. We need to be honest if our workout plan has lapsed into a ritual practice. And the best way to sort of test this is to figure out how you feel if your plan can't be executed, if your plan gets a little derailed, if something sort of messes up what you were going to do. Now, generally speaking, and when we're talking about food and exercise, if something can be significantly, quote, messed up, we're pretty much dealing with the diet culture mindset, because there's rules. Diet culture, fitness culture, there's rules, and it can be done wrong or messed up. But when you're making the decisions, when you are fully autonomous in how you treat your body, there is no more rules. There is no more external meter stick. There's no messed up, because there's no one right way, because it's just a choice. It's not a ritual. So when trying to decide, how your workout plan is kind of structured, think about what would happen if you couldn't do this or it wasn't possible. So let's say, your kid has a fever and stays home from school one day and you can't go for your long run. Or you're at work and something comes up, you have to stay 2 hours late at overtime and you can't go to the gym like you normally do on the way home from work. Or, as we all know, let's just say there's a global pandemic that breaks out, and for 2 going on 3 years, every aspect of our routine has gone off the rails. So in these scenarios, did you or would you respond with sort of flexibility and, self-kindness and adapt without guilt? Or would you be anxious and upset and distracted because something got messed up? I'm doing air quotes, messed up. So I think the best way to know if you've crossed that line from routine to ritual is to know what happens if you can't do it, and how accommodating you are to yourself when circumstances come up. We aren't perfect. Our schedule isn't perfect. Our environment isn't perfect. And there are one heck of a lot of things we have no control over. And so letting go of that urge for compliance will go a long ways. All right. And, the third thing I wanted to bring up and talk about a little bit is food tracking, logging, food diaries, measuring, weighing foods, all this sort of stuff. But I'm going to do a whole episode about that. I think this is important enough. It needs a whole episode. So I'm going to just put that teaser out there like that. But I do get asked a lot, well, what about, like, I'm in recovery from eating disorder. I feel like I should be writing down, at least for a while, what I eat, but is that going to set me back? Or, people that are those planning kind of people, and they like to meal plan and food prep and know what they're going to eat for every meal for the week. Like, is that, compatible with intuitive eating? I get that question a lot. So that's an extensive conversation, I think, beyond what I want to do here. So I'm going to make a note to myself. I'm writing it down on a Post-it note, so it will happen. And I want to get into that conversation because it's really important. But let's just suffice it to say that the what happens if you don't inquiry that I just, applied to the workout plan would be useful in this situation too. Are you using this information that you're gathering to learn something about yourself or learn something about your body and make the experience more yours? Or are you doing all this recording to comply with some sort of plan? So, but think about it in reverse. When I was deep in diet culture, logging all my food, putting stuff in apps, writing, reading labels, scrutinizing portion sizes, all this sort of stuff, if I couldn't do that, I would get kind of freaked out. If I couldn't know what was in something, because maybe you are at a restaurant or you went to somebody's house and they offered you food, or God forbid you try to log it in one of those stupid like apps on your phone or those books that we used to use before we had smartphones, and that product wasn't in there. Remember that? Okay, so if that is sending you into a tailspin, that's probably a problem. So anyway, I don't want to go on too far with this because we're going to talk about this in a completely separate episode. I think it's a problem that many of us either have had or have now, just knowing what is too much. Because there are some really useful tools, but like I said before, the tool doesn't have any meaning. It's how you use the tool that really defines the outcome. But before I close out here with this episode, I want to take just a moment. You guys can hang on for another 5 minutes. I want to tell you about something I've been working on behind the scenes. And this is part of the reason I had this extended season 1, season 2 break. I am expanding my platform or brand or mission or business or whatever word you want to associate with me. I am going to help other health professionals, and I'm adding a whole new line of service under a pro to pro with Maggie sort of brand within a brand. And who is a health professional? Well, that's up to you to decide if you identify as being in the health or wellness space. I think it is a very big umbrella that includes not just your really kind of, textbook health professionals like doctors and nurses and PAs and nurse practitioners. I think this includes dietitians and diabetic educators and psychologists and physical therapists and pharmacists and medical technicians and chiropractors and health coaches and, anybody who identifies as being, sort of an advocate or a participant in the health and wellness space. And I'm listening to you all, and what I hear over and over and over and over and over is that you're trying to work more inclusively with your patients and clients. You are trying to employ some of this weight neutral education that you're getting from me and from other places. And then what happens is your client goes to the doctor, their regular doctor, for a rash or a sinus infection or something very small and silly, and they come out with a recommendation for weight loss or a weight loss plan or a referral to the bariatric surgeon or whatever, and it is a huge setback. They show up at your next visit, at your next training session, at your next, appointment, and they have come totally unraveled because this is a really big setback for a medical professional like a doctor telling you that your body's not okay and giving that advice when it's totally unsolicited and not even part of your intended reason for going. I know you want to help your clients in this situation, but perhaps you are not really comfortable because you're not a doctor. You don't have the background to speak authoritatively about what is right or true or ethical in the practice of medicine. Maybe you can't really understand the science, and so it's like hard to sort of defend, the non-diet approach when there's a doctor who's weight stigmatizing your clients. frankly, you may just be a little overwhelmed by issues with doctors and weight stigma in healthcare yourself. And I feel like we're not going to get anywhere if your clients are stuck every time they go to the doctor having a setback. So this is what I'm going to do now. I mean, I'm doing what I already am doing, but I'm also, like I said, sort of expanding my brand to support you as a health professional through this challenge. I am a doctor. I've been a doctor for 20 years. I understand the science and the practice of medicine. I have a graduate degree in nutrition. I have the perspective to speak with credibility regarding patient experiences in the doctor's office, and I'm comfortable in the areas where you might not be. And really, my bigger mission, the more and more I do this work, is to overturn the culture of weight care that has become our health care. That's the legacy I want to leave, and that's where I really, the more introspection I do, that's really where I feel like I belong, where I have really distinguished expertise, and where I really am passionate. So there's lots and lots and lots more to come. I just wanted to introduce that to you. If you are a health and wellness professional, I have a gift for you, and I have created I'm calling it the Client to Clinic Health Pro Bundle, 5 totally free things that are client ready. That was the whole thing, is that this is not some ideas for you to create content. This is the content. You can literally take from me and my website, take it and make Xerox copies and give it to your patients, or attach it to their after visit summary or whatever, or give it out at your therapy appointments. They are for your use to help your clients be ready to conquer the doctor's office. Because I don't want that to be our obstacle anymore. So the link is in the show notes. If that's of interest to you, my website, which is maggielandismd.com, now has a Health Pro option on the menu, and that will, point you in all the right directions. There's going to be more coming in this Pro to Pro expansion, including a consulting arrangement where I can help health professionals looking to transition to a health at every size model, but they're not sure how. I can be a speaker for your audience, so you can hear some of this stuff. They can hear this stuff straight from the horse's mouth, as one would say. I'm the horse, all right? This cultural disruption, which is really what I see us doing together, is going to take all types. I'm thrilled the more and more and more I work in this space to meet more people that are practicing professionals, are students of these professions, all varieties represented in this health at every size movement. But I want to leverage my specific expertise to make big change. And as you know, there are very few doctors in this space. So I think it's important that the ones that are here, like myself, are visible. And, this is what I want to do. So that's what I'm up to. That is part of the reason I took this extended podcast break, but that's here nor there, because I was the only one who had the plan in my head. And like we said, that's just me competing with myself. I'm back now. I am on fire. Let's do this. Okay. I'm glad you were here with me today to talk about perfectionism and diet culture. New episodes every Wednesday of the Eatfluencer podcast. Thanks for joining me. Until next time. Thank you so much for being here today. If you love what you've learned, follow me on social media at maggielandismd, and you'll never miss a thing. You can also check out my website at maggielandismd.com and sign up to be part of our community of eaters. Thanks again for stopping by. We'll talk again soon.